If you are soft-hearted and watching this at night, keep your lights on. Because what you're about to hear is a real story, and it's terrifying. So whatever happens while you listen, I take no responsibility. Put on your headphones, take a deep breath, and remember, once we begin, there's no turning back. It was late August 2019 at a college in Portland, Maine. The first week of the semester had just started, and a freshman named Jason moved into his dorm. He had unpacked his boxes, arranged his books, and for the first time, the room felt like his own. That evening, his new roommate arrived. The door creaked open, and a tall, quiet figure stepped inside carrying 2 duffel bags. At first glance, he seemed unusual. Jason stood up, extended his hand with a smile, and said, "Hey, I'm Jason." The boy stared at Jason's hand for several seconds before giving the weakest handshake Jason had ever felt. His name was Eric. And from the very first moment, Jason sensed something was wrong with him. The conversation was painfully short. Eric barely spoke, answering only in clipped yes or no responses. When he did smile, it looked forced, as if his face wasn't used to the expression. After a few minutes of awkward silence, both sat on their separate beds. The room was filled only with the dull glow of their laptop screens. Jason thought, "I need a different roommate. Anyone would be better than this guy." But he didn't realize that Eric wasn't just awkward. He was far, far darker. Over the next few days, Jason tried to ignore him. But it was impossible. Eric had strange habits. He stayed up late every night, staring at Jason while he tried to sleep. Sometimes Jason would wake up in the middle of the night and find Eric sitting upright in bed, his eyes wide open, just watching. At first, Jason told himself it was his imagination. But one night, as he rolled over to the side, he locked eyes with Eric, who whispered, "You move a lot in your sleep." Jason's blood turned cold. He forced a laugh, pulled the blanket over his head, and prayed for morning. Things escalated quickly. Eric began asking unsettling questions. "Do you ever feel like someone is inside your room even when the door is locked?" Or, "Have you ever wondered how long you could survive if someone tried to strangle you in your sleep?" Jason stopped answering. He avoided eye contact, avoided conversation, and even avoided spending time in the room whenever he could. But Eric didn't stop. He would lean over Jason's desk when he wasn't there. One night, Jason walked in and caught him scrolling through his laptop, reading private messages. When Jason asked what he was doing, Eric simply smiled and said, "Just curious." That night, Jason decided he couldn't stay. He filed a request to move into another dorm. The request was approved within 2 days, and relief washed over him. But Eric wasn't finished. On the very first night in his new room, Jason was unpacking when he heard a knock at the door. He opened it and froze. Standing there was Eric, grinning, his eyes wide, his voice low. "Miss me already?" he whispered. Jason slammed the door shut. But that wasn't the end. Because Eric wasn't going to let him go that easily. Jason tried to convince himself that it was over. He had moved to a new dorm, and he thought the nightmare would finally end. But he was wrong. The first night, after Eric showed up at his door, Jason didn't sleep at all. He sat in bed, lights on, heart pounding, waiting for another knock. Hours passed, silence. Finally, as the sun rose, Jason felt safe enough to close his eyes. The next few days seemed normal. Classes, cafeteria food, new friends, everything felt fine. But then, the strange things started again. Jason would return to his room and find his desk drawer slightly open, even though he remembered closing it. Sometimes, his notebooks were moved, or his clothes were shifted in the closet. At first, he blamed himself. But one night, the truth revealed itself. Jason came back from the library late, around midnight. As he reached his room, he noticed the door wasn't fully shut. Slowly, he pushed it open and froze. Eric was inside. He was standing in the dark, holding one of Jason's shirts against his face, breathing heavily. When Jason whispered, "What the hell are you doing?" Eric turned, eyes wide, and said softly, "You smell different when you're asleep." Jason's skin crawled. He shouted for him to get out, and Eric simply walked past, brushing Jason's shoulder as if nothing was wrong. Jason locked the door, sat on the floor, and tried to steady his shaking hands. The next morning, Jason went straight to the housing office. He reported everything, but the staff brushed it off as roommate conflict. No one believed him. They told him to try and talk it out. But there was no talking to Eric. There was only fear. That night, Jason stayed with a friend in another dorm. Around 2 in the morning, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. The text read, "You can't hide from me." Jason's chest tightened. He didn't reply. But then another message came. "Check your window." He turned slowly. And outside the window of his friend's dorm room, 3 stories up, stood a shadow. A face pressed against the glass. It was Eric. Jason screamed, his friend woke up, and by the time they rushed to the window, the shadow was gone. Only a faint handprint remained on the glass. The next day, Jason demanded help again. This time, campus police got involved. They promised to handle it, but Jason could tell they didn't take it seriously. After all, Eric was just another student. But Jason knew. Eric wasn't just a student. He was something else, something dangerous. That evening, Jason decided he couldn't risk it anymore. He packed a small bag and told himself he'd sleep in the library, or even outside, until things settled. But when he opened his door, his heart nearly stopped. Inside his room, Eric was sitting on his bed. Calm, smiling, as if he had been waiting. On the desk beside him lay Jason's phone. Eric tilted his head and whispered, "Why are you running from me?" Jason's stomach dropped. The phone buzzed, a message appeared. From Jason's own number. It read, "You belong here. With me." Jason realized with horror. Eric had his phone. Eric had everything. And now, he had him trapped. Jason's mind went blank. Eric was sitting there on his bed, holding his phone, grinning like he had been waiting for this moment. The glow of the screen lit up his pale face. Jason's throat tightened. He forced the words out. "Give me back my phone." Eric tilted his head, smiled wider, and whispered, "Why would I? You don't need it. You need me." Jason's skin crawled. Every instinct told him to run, but his body felt frozen. Eric stood slowly, stepping closer, and Jason backed against the door. For a moment, they were face to face, the air thick with tension. Then, without warning, Eric slammed Jason's phone into the wall. The screen cracked, pieces scattering across the floor. Jason's heart pounded in his ears. Eric leaned close, his voice low. "Now you can't call anyone. It's just us." Jason shoved past him, grabbed the doorknob, and yanked the door open. He sprinted down the hallway, not stopping until he reached the lobby. His breath came in short bursts, his chest burning. He begged the security guard to call the police. Within minutes, officers arrived and searched the dorm. But when they opened Jason's room, Eric was gone. His bags, his clothes, every trace of him vanished, as if he had never been there at all. Jason tried to explain, but no one believed him. They told him maybe Eric had left campus, maybe he was unstable and dropped out. But Jason knew the truth. Eric hadn't just disappeared. He was still out there. The following nights were the worst. Jason moved again into a single room, hoping to feel safe. But every night, just as he started to drift off, the same thing happened. His phone would buzz. Unknown numbers. Messages that read, "I can see you," or "Check your closet." Jason stopped sleeping. He pushed his dresser against the door, taped his closet shut, and left the lights on. But the messages never stopped. One night, at 3 a.m., he gathered the courage to look. The message read, "Look behind you." His hands shaking, Jason turned slowly. In the corner of the room, a figure stood, barely visible in the glow of the lamp. Tall, still, and smiling. Jason blinked. The figure was gone. But on his desk, where his broken phone used to be, lay a single note. Written in sharp, messy handwriting, it said, "You'll never get rid of me." From that night forward, Jason left campus and never returned. He transferred to another state, hoping distance would save him. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, he still wakes to the buzz of his phone. And when he looks, the message is always the same. "I'm already here." If you made it this far and felt the chills, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, because the next one might be yours. This is the second story, and I can almost guarantee at some point in your life you've either experienced this yourself or you've seen it happen to someone else. It was October 2021 in the small college town of Asheville, North Carolina. 3 friends, Daniel, Mark, and Hannah, were celebrating the end of midterms. They decided to drive out to a quiet lake just outside the city, a hidden spot surrounded by thick woods. Students often went there to drink, laugh, and escape the pressure of exams. The night was colder than they expected. Leaves rustled under their boots as they carried bags of snacks and drinks down the narrow trail. The lake shimmered faintly under the pale moonlight. It was quiet, almost too quiet. They sat up near the water's edge, opened a few bottles, and started telling stories. The kind of carefree laughter that only comes when you're young and far away from responsibility. But slowly, the atmosphere began to shift. Daniel noticed it first. A crunch in the woods, like a heavy foot snapping a branch. He froze, staring into the trees. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Mark laughed it off. "Probably a deer. Relax." But Daniel wasn't convinced. Minutes passed. Then Hannah heard it too. The sound of footsteps circling them, slow, deliberate, always just out of sight. Every time they turned their flashlights toward the sound, nothing. Just trees swaying in the night breeze. The laughter faded. Unease spread between them. They huddled closer to the fire they had made, speaking in quieter tones now. Even Mark, who had brushed it off earlier, kept glancing nervously into the dark. Another branch snapped. Closer this time. The sound of leaves being dragged. Daniel gripped his flashlight tighter and called out, "Who's there?" No answer. Only silence. Then a small rock flew from the woods and landed near their feet. Hannah jumped up, her face pale. "That's not an animal," she whispered. The friends looked at each other, panic setting in. Someone was out there, watching them. Mark tried to sound brave. Maybe it's just another group of students messing with us. But even he didn't believe his own words. The forest felt alive now, every shadow moving, every branch creaking like footsteps. The three of them decided to leave. They packed quickly, their hands shaking, eyes darting between the trees. As they walked back down the narrow path, the footsteps followed. Always a few steps behind. Sometimes closer. Sometimes farther. But never stopping. Daniel whispered, "Don't look back. Just keep moving." But Hannah couldn't help herself. She turned, and in the glow of the flashlight, she swore she saw a figure standing at the edge of the trail. Tall, motionless, half hidden by the trees. Her breath caught. She didn't scream. She only whispered, "It's watching us." Mark grabbed her arm and pulled her forward. "Run," he said. And they did. But the sound of footsteps never stopped. They followed all the way back to the car. When they finally slammed the doors shut and locked them, silence returned. But none of them dared to look back into the woods. Because deep down, they all knew the same thing. Whatever had been following them was still standing there. Just waiting.